Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Squid Game Season 1, Episode 3. It's called The Man with the Umbrella. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And it's funny that this episode is very much what I think most of us probably expected Episode 2 to be. Before we got Episode 2 and saw them all go home, and like all the good things that came with that, which I talked about at length last time. This was more like we expected Episode 2 to be, and that's not a bad thing, because a lot of this stuff is super interesting. We get a lot of firsts in this episode. Obviously, we get a second game, which again is the final 15 minutes of the episode. So far I've liked that those have been kind of the finales of the episode. They feel like a big deal for the last 15-20 minutes. But what we get in this episode is we get what it's like being there. What is it day to day? Because in the first episode they woke up, it was time for the game, and then when we come back to the big bunk bedroom, that's when the vote happens. And they decide to leave. So here we get, and this obviously sounds kind of mundane, but we get to see them get dinner and then go to sleep and get their breakfast in the morning, and all is just the routine that comes with all this. But one of the things that the show is doing really well, and something that any story with this premise I think needs to achieve, is that all of these details should be interesting. All of these details for the first time should be kind of intriguing as we're trying to figure out where we are, what the point of this is, who's doing this. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in this episode with regards to the detective, which I'll get to separately in a minute, but just how this all functions, right? And it's something as simple as so there's a whole section in the middle of this where we see more of the process at the start of them being their clothes are changed, so they're all in these beds, and all the employees, for lack of a better word, are changing their clothes. And obviously Pickpocket has stayed awake, and she's smuggled in a knife. And we have a character who I'm now going to refer to as the mother, because she was talking about her baby in the last episode, but she's more prominent in this one as well. And there's a scene where she makes a big song and dance at night time about needing to use the bathroom, and she threatens to piss on the floor, and eventually the guard was like, fine, I'll take you to the bathroom. And I really like the plot, the what would you call it? The words went out. The blocking. That's the word. The blocking of this. I forgot the words for the blocking in a TV show or movie is just kind of like where actors are going to stand and when they're going to enter and that kind of thing. So the blocking of this though is that Pickpocket just kind of slides in from the side of the door and goes, I have to go too. That got me a little chuckle. It's one of those little stylistic choices that just gives it a little bit of character and flair. So they go, and it turns out the mother is just wanting to smoke, and she's smuggled in and blah blah blah. But of course, Pickpocket has brought her knife, and she wants to use the vents. We saw her looking at them earlier, and she undoes the screws. So we get a little bit of Die Hard as she's John McClane her way through the vents. And the only thing we see, is a big kitchen, and they're putting sugar into water, and they're making something. It could be for the next game, which it turns out to be, as we see. Or it could just be, I don't know, they have to feed a lot of people here. This could just be breakfast. This could be lunch tomorrow. But just seeing the size of the operation, something as simple as seeing all of the identical cars going onto the ferry at the start, and just getting a sense of the scale of this. It's one thing to show us this fantastical island with a admittedly slightly dodgy CG shot at the end of the first episode with the roof closing, and it's okay, this is cool, but it's very fantastical. There's something that feels so much more real about it, of seeing the ferry, seeing all the cars, seeing them do scans of all their chips they've got in their behind their ears, seeing them all undressed and just laid out like that. It's almost more real and feels more authentic, because they've given us some of the, just a taste of the mundanity of all of the process, of the methodical process they have to go through to do all this properly. Because all of a sudden it's not just magically they all appear dressed in those bunk beds in episode 1. Now there's hundreds of people working to make this happen. And who are these people who are working for them? are they also people who are in trouble and are have taken these jobs because it'll get them out of their financial troubles? Have they been coerced into it in some way? You know, is the detective's brother, was he a player or is he another employee? And if he is another employee who's been roped into this, is he still there? Is he going to find him somehow under a mask somewhere? Like, all of this is really interesting. And seeing all these parts of the process is cool. And so there's a bit of tension, is like she has to get back in time before the guard comes in, and there's a bit of humor with the mother accusing him of being a pervert, and like, you know, it plays out all really nice. Fun stuff. Like, and even like just the characters getting to know each other again, where some of them are starting to group up, they're starting to team up a little bit. 4, 5, 6 teams up with the son and Ali. And Ali, they really go into this more in this episode, that he's not, like, you know, as familiar with their culture. He's an outsider, so he doesn't know a lot of these kids' games, which, you know, it kind of establishes and then reaffirms at the end of the episode. A lot of these games they're going to play are actually just kids' games with, you know, the tacked on stake of if you fail, you die. But they are kids' games. So, like, he's kind of at a disadvantage. There's a couple of times in the episode where he doesn't understand the word that they're saying, or he has to kind of, you know, like just confirm details or things. So he's at a disadvantage, so we're going to be playing with that, and he's super sympathetic, and the fact that 456 recognizes him and calls him his angel is kind of sweet, and we like all these characters a bit more. So number one then has to be part of their little group, you know, this little alliance, because it might help in certain games. Certainly in that first game, like, if you know, if you go in a group who are all working together to help each other, like we saw Ali save 456. So more stuff like that, it could work. Obviously, the game that happens later in this one, an alliance is basically meaningless, with the exception, unless you can predict what the game is and you can inform your partners what the best tactic is, which, funnily enough, the son actually does, because when he asks the pickpocket what she saw, because he realizes that she saw something, and she says sugar and blah blah blah, and he sees the symbols on the doors when they go into the game room, he actually figures it out. He remembers this challenge, this game from his childhood, but he chooses not to help. And the funny thing is what he says to the others actually sounds logical if you didn't know what was going on, right? The idea that, you know, like, all going to the same thing might actually be a bad idea, because then we're all screwed if it's the worst choice. Maybe we spread out and see which one, you know, because they don't know what the game is. I mean, he strongly suspects he does at this point, but the others don't. So in theory, it's not necessarily the worst idea. But of course, the game turns out to be, they get these honeycomb biscuity things, right? Like, but there's like a carving of a symbol, right? The 4 symbols are a star, a circle, a triangle, and more like intricately an umbrella. And the challenge is they have to use a needle, a little metal needle, to like carve out these symbols and extract the symbol from the rest of the honeycomb without breaking any of the symbol. It has to be perfect, right? They can break the rest of it, the excess, but the symbol itself has to be intact. And of course, when they fail, they get shot. And I was actually thinking, as I was watching this, like, obviously the triangle is by far the easiest because it's just 3 straight lines. It's the simplest. It's not got sort of extra dangly bits that are harder, because the star is probably the second easiest, but it still has a lot of points going out, so it's maybe very easy to snap one of them off. And it got me thinking that unless, like, the rules are completely something, you know, let's say they all had point values or something like that, which would be completely arbitrary and just whatever the person running the game has decided, you know, whatever it could be. But by and large, like, if the shape itself is the important thing, the triangle is probably always going to be the best choice, right? Even if you didn't know what the game was, like, triangle is a simple shape, it's 3 straight lines, it's structurally useful, you know, it's used in building and things like that. You know, I like, really tough, right? Like, the other ones are all tougher. Like, the circle might be just as hard as the, I mean, it's probably not as hard as the umbrella. There's just too many, like, variables in the umbrella because of all the points and the extra handle and everything. But the circle's pretty tough too. So we see him, like, licking it to, like, help him get through it, and but some of the visuals here are really great. The first guy who gets shot goes down the slide because they're on, like, a playground set, and he goes down, so you see the blood smeared down the slide. It's, you know, it plays with the tension, but it's very different from the tension in the first game, which was this mad dash with all these pauses. This instead was lots of people working intricately on their little thing, which obviously is a very different scene, but that's okay. That's good. It's good that it's still feeling fresh. It's good that these things are different. They assumed it was going to be a physical game. In fact, as soon as they walk in the room, 4, 5, 6 is like, well, is this going to be like we all have to stay in the climbing frame, the jungle gym? Do we have to all stay in that? Are we going to have to try and not fall into the floor? Is it going to be facing again? Are we going to have to try and kick each other off until X amount are eliminated? You know, could it be something like that? And that's the thing. I suspect at some point there is going to be a game that pits them directly against each other. Because up until now, other than getting in each other's way in the first game, there's no reason why you should want anyone else to lose. Other than the fact that, you know, it means there's maybe more prize money for you. But like, in the game themselves, there's no reason that you have to screw other people over. But eventually, I'm expecting a game where you have to win, you have to make other people lose, which means them dying, which is going to up the stakes even more. And if I'm going to play devil's advocate for the son, is that maybe he's predicting this, and that maybe he thinks like having them be eliminated in a game like this is better now than having to to his face, to 4, 5, 6's face, like screw him over later. Now, obviously, that is being very generous, and I'm giving him a lot of like leeway with that. But it did occur to me that maybe he's thinking ahead to, well, eventually we're maybe going to have to face against each other, and maybe it's better that like I just like roll the dice with this just now. I don't know. Like, that's a possibility. We have to talk about the other character. So there's another guy with glasses who I don't have a name for yet, but he gets a message in his breakfast, and then he's like led down a separate corridor at the end of the episode. So there's someone there getting favoritism. Whether or not he's a plant or he's there to like record the experience of the others or something, I don't know. But very curious indeed. So also very interesting. So yeah, game was good. All of the team building, some of the relationships, you know, the mother really wants to like form an alliance with Snake Tattoo guy, and kind of helps him out in the game a little bit. So that's something we'll potentially see. She seems like she's going to be an interesting, I would say quite an antagonist, although maybe if she's teaming with him, she's going to naturally end up being kind of an antagonist. But maybe she'll turn her back on Snake Man when he's kind of a shithead at some point, and it'll be kind of an uplifting little moment, potentially. And the fact that Pickpocket, like, kind of, you know, she got Triangle as well because she followed the son. She was like, no, he has an idea. I'm going to like follow his lead here, and it worked out for the best. So there is someone that kind of knows that he figured it out, or at least strongly suspects. So there is like there's a path for later for this coming out and being exposed. So again, curious to see that. So obviously we have to talk about the detective, right? That's the other big thing of the episode. And that's what the episode starts with. He's following them. It's how we see all the cars go onto the ferry. He sneaks under the car and pulls a bit of a Steven Seagal under the train in Under Siege 2. I don't know why it's I think I was talking about Under Siege 2 earlier, which is why it's the first example that came to mind. I'm sure there's plenty of examples of doing it with a car. Indiana Jones, I'm pretty sure, did it with a car. But he gets in, and when they're scanning, because he pretends to be one of the players, but when they're scanning the ears, obviously the scan doesn't work. He wakes up, he quickly kills the guy, throws him over the boat, but takes his outfit. So he is actually infiltrated and is pretending to be one of, I think, the squares. It's funny, I think I meant to crack a joke in the first episode about them having PlayStation symbols in their faces. It's not quite, obviously, because I think it's triangles, squares, and circles, I think, is what I've seen. I don't think I've seen any X's, but if we see any X's, we'll know that Sony are backing this somewhat. But all of this stuff was really fascinating, like seeing him. Obviously, there's suspicion he's not supposed to talk. So all of this is super tense because there's the worry that he's going to do the wrong thing at any moment and give himself away. But they go to, and this is kind of the thing, right? Like, they are the ones who are so determined to have these face coverings for this secrecy. They've kind of made it like possible for this to kind of happen in a weird way, that he can infiltrate to this extent. But he ends up, they go to their bunks, and he's luckily the key that he's got tells him what the room is, because otherwise he'd be screwed. But it's just this crappy little room. He gets fed dinner at one point like a prisoner, and he's not supposed to show his face outside the room. He wakes up and he's in there in the game room. He's helping. He's there to dispose of the bodies. We find out, but he doesn't really know what he's supposed to do at first. And someone points this out, and it's actually very lucky for him that when the game ends, we have this big tense sequence where one of the people who have lost and have not been able to do it grabs one of the guards, right? Grabs one of the square faces and holds him as a hostage. And the whole time I'm thinking, they're just going to shoot him as well. They're just going to like shoot through him to get to you. They're just going to see him as like a lost, and that's okay. That's kind of the mentality that it feels like. And it wasn't quite that. It ended up being the boss guy who came in and shot him at the end. But more so because he took his mask off, because the guy forces him to take his mask off. And it's someone who's quite young. It's someone who's barely 20. And which is what got me thinking about the brother character. But the end of the episode makes it clear that this guy who took his mask off and got shot, luckily for Detective, was the one who noticed that he didn't know what he was doing and said that he wanted to talk to him after the game about his confusion. So he kind of lucked out there, right? So he gets a lucky ending to the episode where he's not been cut out yet. And he's obviously, as time goes on, he's learning how this works. So he's going to be able to just, go unnoticeable better as he goes on. But at some point you assume they're going to hand him a gun and say you have to shoot the people who lose, and that might present a big moral conflict for him, and that could be something we have to deal with throughout. At some point does he find a way to communicate with 456 and let him know that he's in there and he's there to help if things go to a point where they want help, because right now they volunteered to come back. And something like 190 or 180 people came back at the 201, which is a very high return rate. So, very curious to see how this progresses. I'm sure we'll get the number next episode as to how many we've whittled it down to now. I would suspect it's probably halved, give or take again, from last time. So, what's interesting is that these are going to get more and more intimate. It is notable that none of the main characters that we know properly died in this game. That is going to start happening at some point, you expect. They're going to break our hearts with someone's death soon. And it's not going to be Snake Man. Snake Man's going to survive longer than we probably want him to, because he's the dickhead. He's going to survive longer. That's the rules of TV, right? We're going to have to earn his demise if indeed that's what happens. Because the show might pull a thing where we end up redeeming him and we end up caring about him, and in which case, all bets are off. But at least based on what we have right now, that's kind of where we stand. So, yeah, obviously the character dynamics, they're being kind of friendly and sweet with each other. Some of the cast right now, the excitement of having Pickpocket eventually sort of befriend 456 or trust some of them is going to be very heartwarming. I suspect a lot of the heart of the show is going to come from there. Assuming I kind of suspect her to survive, right? Honestly, but it would be a gut punch for her to fight, open up and kind of become friends with them, and then or maybe not even become friends, but sort of make a choice to almost sacrifice herself to help them at some point. Now, admittedly, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now because her whole goal is to help get her parents out of North Korea. So she has a goal right now, which is more important than anyone she's met in here. But as this goes on and they go through more and more of this together, and maybe they realize that the people running this have an ulterior motive, maybe they suspect that they won't just get the money at the end, maybe there's doubt cast at some point, which I'm still kind of expecting to be the case, then there's a lot to deal with there. But the idea that everyone who's there enforcing the games is enlisted either similar or through maybe a slightly different way to all the players is kind of interesting. Do they want to be here? Have they joined this like a cult? Are they here just kind of like the players and they're in trouble, or they got some financial issues and it's more about the pay? There's a lot of potential reasons that these people could be here doing this, and I'm fascinated to find out. You know, are they? I mean, I don't expect there's going to be a lot of winners, so maybe this is a ridiculous idea, but maybe assuming there's enough winners from some of these games, maybe some of these people are actually ex-winners. I don't know. Maybe that's probably nonsense. I wouldn't guess that. If they pulled that, I'd be kind of like, oh yeah. I'm not surprised that you would have that idea, but I don't actually think that's the case right now. But I'll throw it out there just as a quick thought. Really good stuff. I was looking forward to watching episode 3. I am now looking forward to watching episode 4. It is definitely one of the better shows I have watched this year. Certainly one of the better new shows I've watched this year. So, pumped. I'm pumped for more of the story and more of these characters, which thus far it's done a very good job of making me care about a number of them. So, thumbs up. It is good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So this has been episode 3 of Squid Game. Let me know in the comments what you think of this one. You can, of course, like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All those things help out a bunch on YouTube. They add to the almighty algorithm. You know, in this show, they have to adhere to Power Rangers, man. But on YouTube, we adhere to the algorithm, and we are all at the mercy of it. So please hit those buttons, because it does help out a lot. You can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month. And keep all the content coming. And of course, you can follow on Twitter. You can get myself personally at Wooble89, or you can get at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?